Hello, ladies. Welcome to Her Poison Pen. This is a safe space for women to explore, create, and enjoy the art of dark fiction. Together, we will look at the work of female creators, examine the history of dark genres, and learn about the differences between male and female voices in this important literary landscape. Each month, I'll review a work of art produced by a female artist, and each month I'll join in conversation with influential female writers, poets, editors, publishers, and filmmakers. You'll meet some of the brightest new artists in this field, and if you currently are or would like to become a creator of dark fiction, this is the place for you. Because that's what Her Poison Pen is all about. Women creating and enjoying dark fiction written by women, about women, and for women. Today, in our first episode together, I have some questions for you. If you were being chased through a field by a crazed serial killer who was brandishing a machete and a shovel, would you be dressed only in your underwear? And would your underwear be lacy? And would everything match? We'll get back to fancy matching underwear in a minute, but first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jess Hart, and I write dark psychological suspense novels featuring deeply flawed but powerful women. My books are about women for women, and I teach other women how to write for female readers. And here's why. It all started with witches. When I was a kid, my parents bought my sister and me a subscription to Jack and Jill magazine. When the magazine arrived, I snatched it away from my little sister and ran up to my room because every month in the back of that magazine, there was a story about a Russian witch, Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga lived in a barrel-shaped cottage in the woods, and whenever she needed to escape something, her cottage grew giant chicken legs that would carry her to safety. She could summon thunderstorms and control the wind. That old witch was dark and scary and powerful. I loved everything about Baba Yaga. My fascination with witches expanded to monsters, demons, and chainsaw-wielding killers. The darker, the better. But despite my enjoyment of dark, scary books and movies, there was always something that felt a little off to me, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I read this quote by Stephen King. At 13, I wanted monsters that ate whole cities, radioactive corpses that came out of the ocean and ate surfers, and girls in black bras who looked like trailer trash. That's when it hit me. So many of the girls and women in scary movies and books were either virgins or sluts, angels or bad girls. The bad girls always got what was coming to them, a gruesome end. And the virgins, who were sexy and sort of pure at the same time, managed to outsmart or run away from the monster wearing only Lacy matching underwear. That just didn't ring true to me. I mean, get real. How many of us wear Lacy matching underwear when we're exploring old barns or haunted houses? I realized that most of the dark stories I enjoyed were written by male authors who depicted women both physically and emotionally through a male lens. Not their fault. That's what they knew. So I decided to write the kind of stories I enjoy reading and watching, but from a woman's perspective. I decided to write dark novels about powerful but deeply disturbed women, and that's when my career as a full-time author took off. I'm really jazzed to share with you that I recently signed a 3-book contract with Crystal Lake Publishing, one of the most respected publishing houses specializing in horror and dark fiction in the world today. I've learned a lot about dark fiction written by and for women, and I want to share what I've learned with other women, with you, because women's voices matter in this increasingly popular and sought after art form. Women's voices matter in dark fiction for three significant reasons. First, women creators have the unique opportunity to challenge long-standing tropes so prevalent in dark fiction. Female characters once portrayed as flat, one-dimensional stereotypes can be replaced with multi-layered characters who confront not only physical, but also psychological and emotional fears. They can exact revenge and gain agency. These character differences become authentic when written from a very personal perspective. Next, female creators of dark fiction approach fear from a deeper psychological space than their male counterparts, because the threats women face daily in the real world are very different from what men face. Margaret Atwood summed up this difference in her famous quote, "Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them." Domestic violence, psychological and social aggression in the workplace, and day-to-day survival in a patriarchal society provides fodder for complex, layered explorations of fear. A third reason women's voices are critical in this literary arena is that physical terror and pain associated with the female body are more accurately depicted from a place of knowing rather than a place of imagining. How many women have heard a male physician dismiss pain by saying, "It's no worse than your menstrual pain"? Female creators bring a unique perspective, offering an authentic lens through which to view characters as they navigate challenges in this challenging and vast literary landscape. Dark fiction, in all its many forms, is more popular today than ever before. It encompasses a wide range of genres, from mystery to thriller, to horror to romance, erotica, suspense, fantasy, and even sci-fi. To help us kick off our journey, Poison Pen welcomes author and editor Amanda Symes. Amanda is an author, editor, and publisher, and she writes under the pen name A.M. Symes. We met during a mastermind session hosted by Crystal Lake Publishing. I knew right away that Amanda would be the best featured author to join us on our first edition of Her Poison Pen. Hola, Amanda Symes.
Hello.
Hello. I am so grateful to you for being our very first featured author here on Her Poison Pen. And as you know, Her Poison Pen is an exploration of women who read and watch and enjoy dark fiction, and also creators of dark fiction. So it's especially joyful to have you begin this journey with us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, this is Amanda Symes, and she is an extremely accomplished short story and flash fiction writer, and her favorite genre is horror. And so that leads me to my very first question for you, Amanda. Why horror? How did you get started in horror?
And hello. So I have two instances from my childhood that I like to blame for kind of throwing me down the horror path. But honestly, horror has been woven into so many aspects of my life, even from an early age. But one of the first instances was the movie Gremlins. So when I was about 4 years old, I was playing with the TV when I was not supposed to. And I was flipping through the channels and I came across Gizmo. And Gizmo's adorable and he looked just like the stuffed animals that I always slept with. So I wanted to watch the movie. Did not take long for me to realize that it was not a sweet movie that I was watching. And later that night, I made my parents lock all of my stuffies under my bed because, or in the basement, I should say, because I didn't want them to eat me. So the second instance isn't so much one moment, but my parents are big fans of the original Twilight Zone series. And I grew up watching those. We had family night. We would, order pizza and watch movies or TV, and Twilight Zone was almost always on. So I feel like Rod Serling narrated part of my childhood. um, Beyond that, my grandparents they were really big storytellers, including ghost stories. We used to tell ghost stories around the fire when we went camping. And I loved that aspect of them. I would wake up early in the morning when we visited so that I could have breakfast with Grandpa, and he would always tell stories, and some were true, some not so much. But then I would also, with my grandma, I would always beg to go with her to have coffee with the ladies, and I would just get lost in the storytelling from all of that. So, that storytelling aspect combined with little bits of horror from, those shows, and then also Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and scary stories, it all kind of led me to where I am today.
Wow. 4 years old is a little bit early for gremlins, I think. A little bit early for that. Yeah.
Yep.
So you seem to focus on short stories and flash fiction. So why that? And have you considered branching out into some of the longer forms like the novella or the novel?
Yeah, my parents were big readers, so we always had reading time when I was growing up, and I'm a proud member of Book It and Pizza Hut Club and Scholastic Reading, and I always read longer stories like Goosebumps or Boxcar Children, Anamorphics, and Nancy Drew, all of those, and they made me want to write my own stories, but I didn't know how to develop that long form stories, so I would practice with flash fiction and short stories. And I did that long enough that it kind of wired my brain to that short story format. Um, I like the aspect of short stories and that there's so many different characters and monsters and creepy stories that you can cover in a short story. I always say that, if I'm curious about what would happen if a Wendigo appeared while I'm camping, what would I do? So I can spend a couple hours writing out that story and I get my answer. It's not a big time restraint for that. Um, I admit that I took some bad advice early in my writing career. I had a professor who said that I had to have multiple short stories published to build a name for myself before I could even consider writing a novel. And the same professor also said that I had to find one genre or one topic to write about, that it was not a good idea to write about numerous different things because writers want consistency. Um, there was no way that I could limit my imagination to one subject like that. So I admit it put a bit of a wall up for me when tackling, novel length stories. Now I understand that that was bad advice. So I am working on a few different novels now. I have two of them that are finished and I've queried them both out. And one I recently got a request for a call about it. So fingers crossed, hoping
Yay,
that's a
yay.
good thing. And then I also have two other novels that I've plotted out. So that will be my homework for the early 2026 writing season. Um, but I admit I do love short stories. It's something I'm always going to write. There's so many submission calls with other fun horror publications, and my brain loves the challenge of the short format. It is a different challenge versus the longer stories. And I figure I'll keep writing those short stories. And if there's one that really sticks with me, if there's a character or something that really latches on, then that's probably a sign that that one should turn itself into a novella or a novel.
Sure, sure. Well, you and I have been corresponding a little bit, and as you wrote to me at one point and said that not only do you really enjoy scaring your readers, but you enjoy scaring yourself, that you put yourself in scary situations and adventures just to kind of get scared. So, could you share a couple of those scary
Yeah.
adventures with us?
Yeah, I've had two that I've had in the last year. The first one would be my friends and I went to Tulum earlier in the year, and one of them had the bright idea to go snorkeling in an underwater cave.
Wow.
I am not a fan of tight spaces, so that idea was very scary. I already have a hard time breathing through the snorkels, and then the idea of doing that in a cave underwater was just that was terrifying. But they were all going to do it, and I was not going to stay in the hotel room. So I said yes. I went along. I will admit that the entire time my heart rate was up. My watch kept beeping at me and telling me I needed to relax. But I did it. I only freaked out a little because at one point there's a cave within the cave, and we went into that tiny, tiny little room area. And the tour guide explained to us that that little cave within the cave is where they used to do Mayan sacrifices.
Oh, wow.
So that was scary, but oddly enough, that helped me get through the rest of it because my brain then went into writer mode. Then it was, the idea of people swimming through this dark cave. We had flashlights, but the Mayans didn't, obviously. So swimming through this cave and then sacrificing themselves was just a very interesting concept. So it turned into a short story that I just submitted to an anthology. So we'll
Excellent.
see where that goes. The other thing I did recently, this past summer, was solo skydiving. So I admit that I was tricked into this one, or I claim I'm tricked into this one. A friend of mine, I've gone tandem jumping with her before, and the first time that we went, excuse me, the first time we went skydiving was really fun. I was not nervous for that because it was tandem, so we were with a professional. There's a great company here in Minnesota that does skydiving. And the guy that I was partnered with looked exactly like Marv from Home Alone, and he was really funny. So the whole time, was laughing, we're having fun, great experience. So fast forward to this past summer, my friend sends me the link to the same company, asks if I want to do it again. I didn't click on the link, so I just said yes. And then about a week before, she starts texting me. I'm like, "Are you nervous? I'm so nervous." And I'm thinking, why? We've done this before. And that's when I actually opened what I had signed up for, and it was solo sky jumping. Um, Terrifying, yep. But again, I can't back down from something then. And, she still wanted to go through with it. So we did. Um, I showed up all bright eyed and bushy tailed about it. We did a few hours of training with the class, learned how to, practice tuck and rolling, learned all the 700 different things that could go wrong and how to survive if any one of them happened. And naturally, being the horror writer, during our lunch break, we end up talking with a couple of the instructors where there's recently a story of a woman who killed her husband from skydiving.
Wow.
And yep, what she did was she was sneaky, or tried to be. They did solo jumps and they had all their gear certified. And then overnight, she went into his gear and she cut the cords to his parachute. So then when they went to do their jump the next day, obviously he did not make it. He didn't have an attached parachute. Um, it was a riveting discussion, great. Made me more nervous and less nervous at the same time, but we still did it. We squished into a plane, went up 4,000 feet, jumped out. My friend went first, and so I had a little more time to panic about it. And then it was my turn, and I admit I would have screamed bloody murder the whole way down, except I forgot to take a breath right before I let go of the plane, so I had no oxygen. So
Oh my God.
I couldn't scream. I landed in a cornfield slightly off mark, but I survived. So it was fun. It was terrifying. May or may not do that one again.
Wow, that's great. That's a great story. And one of the things that I love about writing is that everything that we do informs our work. So you hear this story about a woman that tries to kill her husband, and immediately the brain starts going, "Oh, that's good. I can use that." So that's great. Let's talk about your craft a little bit more. Are there themes that you return to, even though you work in different genres and you have a lot of different monsters and stuff? Do you go back to the same theme over and over again?
Yep. I do tend to, I'd say most of my stories follow the theme of karma. Whether I'm writing about Bigfoots, ghosts, vampires, aliens, haunted houses, whatever. I'm a little all over the map when it comes to the specifics, but most of the stories have a pretty heavy theme of karma or characters overcoming, that of some sort. Um, I like those topics because, as weird as it sounds, it gives me a sense of peace. And I think it's because it's me dealing with real life situations, whether they're good or bad situations. They're not always bad, but I get a chance to change the ending through fiction. And, that part I really enjoy about it. I do take a lot from real life events and dialogue, and people that I meet are in my own writing. It's kind of funny. Whenever I tell someone that I'm a horror writer, they almost always have the same reaction with that goofy look of like, oh my goodness, and they want to know if I had a bad childhood or something. And I didn't. And I have fantastic parents, wonderful childhood. My parents, even to this day, they read everything that I write, despite not liking horror themselves. So kudos to them for pushing through. But I just realized that when I, talk with other people and I get those stories out of them, they have some fascinating things to share as well. And I have learned that a lot of them, if I just let them talk, they almost all have some story or situation that happened to them that they just can't quite explain. And I've come to realize that most of them have their own ghost story. Really, it's something they can't explain, and they want to talk about it because they can't explain it. They don't know what happened. And they're just looking to not be made fun of. I think they want somebody to hear it and not pick on them for it. And I'm all ears, I'm always looking for new content. So I am the perfect person to come to with those stories.
With the ghost story, yeah.
Yep.
But there's a lot of stuff that goes on around us all the time that we just we can't explain. We can't
Right.
understand it at all.
Hmm.
So is there a story that you would like to see either that, in a movie or read that hasn't been written yet, hasn't been produced, or at least to your knowledge?
Good question. I would say, and it's just because I can't think of a great example, so I don't know that it's been written recently, but I would love to see or watch a story where the leading lady does all the right things and still ends up in a ghost story. Um, to me, it seems like, especially with female leads, there seems to be a lot of women where they're kind of blissfully waltzing through life and suddenly they're sucker punched out of nowhere. They're dragged through all this terror before they escape. But they don't seem to be very active in the situation. They kind of just manage not to die. And I would like to see these characters kind of take the bull by the horns themselves. They do the right decisions. They're 100% active in their own survival. And, they make it. You got to have somebody live at the end, of course, but where they participate more in it. I guess a little bit of this would probably be like Sigourney Weaver's character in Alien. In that one, she still gets sucker punched and she's still dragged through a little bit. She's at least more active in her survival. And yeah, if there are stories like that and I'm just not thinking of them, please share because anybody watching, I would love to read those.
Yeah. And she saves the cat too. So that's
Well, of course, that's important. I think we
that's
all would
important.
have been extremely sad if that cat didn't make it.
Exactly. Okay. As you know, we've talked about this. Right now, dark fiction is extremely popular with women, and I think more and more so as the years go by. Why do you think that is? And I'm talking about dark fiction, everything from horror to dark erotica, thriller, mystery, even true crime.
Yeah, oddly enough, my friends and I just had this discussion. We have a friend group, and the girls in the group were talking about how right before bed we watch Forensic Files, Unsolved Mysteries, or Dateline. And the guys in the group were saying that they watch like Friends or That 70s Show or car shows. So we thought it was interesting that the girls are all watching these murder mystery things right before we go to sleep, and the guys are watching humor. um, but I would say, for me personally, and I think for, the women that also that, enjoy this stuff, it's a sense of comfort to watch these things, which sounds crazy, but we can probably all agree that in a majority of these stories on the crime podcast and forensic files, and even horror in general, it's usually female victims.
Yes.
And so when I'm watching that stuff, I'm paying attention to how the victim ended up in that bad situation. Was it something that she did that I can make sure I don't do? Or were there signs that she missed that I can watch out for to make sure that I'm safe or that my girlfriends are safe? And God forbid we end up in something like that. How do we escape? Um, and that's not just for crime. I love having those what if discussions. Like if we were camping and a Wendigo walks into the campsite, what do you do? If I'm home alone and I wake up and somebody's standing in my room, but they're see through, what do I do? If something lands on the roof and it's not Christmas Eve, what do you do? It's kind of fun to fantasize about those situations because I can, safely fantasize about them in my imagination. And like I said, gives me a little bit of an unrealistic sense of security because I feel like I've plotted it out in my head. So therefore, I'd be able to survive if it actually happened.
Okay. This kind of tags on to what you've been just talking about. Do you think that men and women take different things from, or different emotions, different experiences from horror and dark fiction in general?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's never a 100% answer, and I can think of four guys in my writing group that are going to argue with what I'm about to say. But I would say that I think women tend to read more between the lines of a story, and versus men reading more for the surface entertainment value of it.
Mm-hmm.
A good example, I think, would be Frankenstein. So, Frankenstein, stories scientist who's trying to play God, creates a monster, immediately regrets it, lots of fire and pitchforks later, and the story ends. Women, I think, read the story more as motherhood. Yes. They internalize it. They're talking about creating life, being terrified of that life that you just brought into the world, and then freaking out about it. So I think that's a good example between the two. I would also say that something I definitely I do this myself, and I've heard other women say it where they put themselves in the victim's position during during the true crimes or the horror stories. Not necessarily that they identify as the victim, but as I was just saying about true crime, women see or read about a victim and they think, okay, if that was me, what would I do to survive? So I think that translates broader to the horror community.
Okay, yeah. Now you run a publishing company, yes, publishing house.
Yep.
And so you see a lot of different writers, men and women. And do you think that men and women write differently in this genre?
Yeah, definitely. We do see this, again, kind of generalizing here, but we do see a difference. So the men's stories that come in tend to be more linear and filled with straightforward like action steps. Like you have happy family, enter monster, figure out how to beat the monster, find the monster killing weapon, use it, end. Not a bad design at all for a story. It's clear, it's action oriented, still leaves room for entertainment and all the horror twists that we always love, of course. But even the twists, they tend to have pragmatic decision making and like appropriate responses each time. The women's stories tend to have a lot more misdirection and wrong paths and bad decision making and decision making that doesn't necessarily have immediate consequences either. So they continue to make these same bad decisions over and over until crap really hits the fan. I would say an example that I like to use is driving. So it'd be kind of the equivalent of like with men, it's like driving on a highway, whereas women, it's like driving on a backcountry road. You still get there, but with women, it's a lot more of these twists and turns and things. I will say one other thing, the themes. It's funny, we get a lot more monster and alien stories from the male writers, and the women's stories are very heavy on more of the true crime stories.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting. And what's the name of your company again? Tell our viewers.
Oh, it's Dead Birds Publishing.
Love that title. I love
Yeah.
that name. Um, So tagging along with that, Amanda, in your view, what unique gifts can women creators bring to these genres?
I've said it a little already, kind of part of my rambling here. But I do think women bring a unique path to storytelling. Some days it is really nice to read that straightforward story about, like the guy selling property to an out of towner. Turns out the buyer is a vampire, and now he has to save himself and his girlfriend. You gotta love Dracula. Um, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to go on a lot of those twists and turns and those back roads. And I like getting lost in the woods, on a path that may or may not be a real path, in woods that may or may not be haunted. But it's fun to see that leading lady then, plow ahead anyways. And it's usually because she's sick and tired of some situation that she feels trapped in. So no ghost or fairy or demon or whatever is going to stop her. So I think that women have the ability to infuse that emotion, use our strength of perception and emotion and empathy, I think, to really infuse that into the fibers of a story. And again, for other women, like I said earlier, I feel like women tend to read more between the lines of these stories. And so they're looking for that. They're looking for that emotion and empathy that's built in there. And I definitely don't just mean positive emotions. I will argue that women can be much more vindictive than men. We
Yes.
we tend to make it like our life's mission when we feel wronged. Like we are going to seek revenge and get karma and whatever else, which is not good to do in real life. But that's why we have fiction writing.
Yeah, I'm learning through my research in this area that I'm almost at the point where I can pick up a book, not know the author, not know the writing style at all, but once I get into it, I can almost tell if it was a female or a male creator. Like right away, it
Yep.
becomes clearer to me. So that's kind of an interesting
Mhm.
thing that's happening. When is your next publication coming out and how can people get a hold of your work?
I have one coming out very soon. January 9 is the next one, but 2025 was a great year for me. I'm very happy. I had 10 short stories that were accepted to different publications, and some of
Wow.
them have already come out. Some are slated for early 2026. My favorite is the one that's coming out January 9th. It's part of the two-part anthology called Supernatural Parables. And what each author who was accepted, they had to write a dark story and a light story, a matching light story. And both anthologies are great. I love all of the stories that are in them. But what I really like about my stories is my main character, Kimberly. So she is based on a friend of mine who is also named Kimberly. And she's this butt kicking supernatural fighter. Basically, she hunts all the things that go bump in the night. And my character has a very strong backbone. She's very smart, but she's also a little evil herself. She likes to bully the bullies. So I had so much fun writing this character. And my friend Kimberly does actually, she enjoys reading about her doppelganger. So I'm really excited about that one. Anything that I have published or will publish, I always add to my website, which is just Symes at WordPress. We can include the link, or I can add a
Yeah,
comment.
well, I'll put it down below in the description of the video here. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, as we started, we are looking at the work of women who write about and for other women and women who enjoy reading and watching work produced by women. So we're looking at that in Her Poison Pen. Considering that, do you have any additional thoughts for the viewers of this channel?
I love that premise, by the way. That's fantastic. I'm so excited to see everyone else that you interview and that you do. But I would say advice wise is let your imagination run wild and make sure that it can run wild. And I really mean wild. put the phone down, take the earbuds out, stop listening to podcasts and music 24/7, and try being bored. I know nobody wants to be bored, but it is very valuable to be bored once in a while. And I like to have conversations with strangers. I am an introvert, so that does knock me out of my comfort zone. But I have had some amazing conversations with strangers over the years. Standing in line or at the airport, you strike up a conversation, and I've this is a very random one, but I've actually had two of my most interesting conversations with strangers happened at the Minnesota State Fair while sitting on a park bench eating fried pickles.
Oh,
Crazy. Happened twice. Both conversations were amazing. But I like to use those, nuggets, those dialogue moments, or those characters, and then throw them into a weird situation to see what happens. If you can't think of a weird situation, there's so many horror anthologies that have open calls. Go look those up. They usually have a theme to them that you can use. And it's just use that to help, spark some ideas if need be. And then write. I honestly believe we all need to knock it off with the imposter syndrome stuff. I do it myself. I know I do, and we need to stop it, because I think that the hardest part of writing is the ideas, the inspiration part. And if you have that, then you're good. I mean, the formatting, editing, and all that's kind of the easy logistical stuff. You can either teach yourself or, that's why we have editors and publishers. They help with that. But if you have that creative idea, then write it down. You can do it.
I like all of that, except the part about the fried pickles. I don't know about fried pickles.
They're really good. They're weird, but I don't know. Honestly, it might be the whole situation. It might be that I'm at the state fair. I'm enjoying myself. It's a hot summer day. If somebody handed me one right now, maybe they're not so good, but at the Minnesota State Fair, they are delicious.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Well, Amanda, this has been so delightful. I've loved hearing your ideas. I love hearing how you scare yourself, put yourself out there, and how that informs your work. So I really want to thank you for being our featured author, our kicking off this adventure. And I really appreciate you coming. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. This is really fun. I'm happy to kick it off.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Ciao.
As the full moon begins to wane, I'll head back to my desk and work on our next episode, Why Fear Feels Good. See you on the next new moon. And until then, put words on paper and stay witchy.